Greetings fellow Earthlings and welcome to wine country here in Temecula, California. We've come all the way to wine country to drive a potato, this russet brown 1979 MGB Roadster. And I'd like to thank Adrian at M-Force Motors for giving us the opportunity to experience this retro beast this morning. MG comes from Morris Garages, named after William Morris, who started the company in Abingdon, Oxford in 1924. Originally known for bicycles and motorbikes, they developed a reputation for some lightweight roadsters before the Second World War, like the MGTA, MGTB, and believe it or not, the MGTC and MGTD. After the Second World War, they continued their success with the lightweight roadster, the MGA, which gave birth in 1962 to this, the MGB.
MGB, latest of breed, latest example of the octagon spirit. MGB, a high-performance vehicle, America's largest selling imported sports car. Competition-proved engine turns up speed in excess of 105 miles per hour. Creature comforts too, snug roll-up windows and draft-free top. The safety of big, fade-free disc brakes. Oft-times the octagon spirit seizes pedestrians as well. Then you find yourself surrounded by ardent admirers. Get the octagon spirit. Removable hardtop or soft-top convertible. Get an MGB.
This MGB is from 1979. The original price was $7,200, making it a pretty affordable roadster for the time. It had the same B-series engine that the MGA had, but bored out to a 1.8 from the 1.6 that was in the MGA. The gearbox also is the same 4-speed carried over from the MGA, and some of these cars had the optional electric overdrive to give you a 5th gear. This car, as you can hear, doesn't. We could do with some more gears maybe. This car is definitely a survivor. It has 35,000 original documented miles from new, owned by a real enthusiast. It is in fantastic condition for the age of this thing, and really is quite fun to drive, though you don't want to be going too fast in it. Compared to a modern car, definitely has some shakes and rattles, and my huge clumping great feet are threatening constantly to press the accelerator when I'm desperately trying to press the brake. I have to turn my foot to the side like this to be able to hit the brake and not hit the accelerator at the same time, which can be quite disconcerting on these hilly, windy roads. But you certainly do get to use the gearbox quite a lot, because the engine, it has enough power to do what we're doing, but certainly is not going to scare you with the throttle response. So mostly you're finding that you're either in 4th gear or you're gunning it in 2nd and 3rd. So let's take a look at the motor on this fire-breathing animal. This car, like most of the MGBs, has got a longitudinally mounted straight 4. Kind of a cool system here for holding the hood up. You just press that button and it lets it back down again. Older way of doing it before the gas struts, I suppose. So here is our 1.8 litre straight 4. It is an iron block with an iron head, push rods and overhead valves. So very much like a half of an American V8 for the time. Another thing you notice here is the single carburetor. This is an aftermarket K&N air filter. But this single carburetor was a detune from the 2 carburetors that the car originally came with. And it's one of the reasons why this car originally had over 90 horsepower, but by the time it came to the end of its production, one of these cars, they were down to more like 70 horsepower. And that's all due to these different smog regulations that the American market needed to put onto these engines to make them clean. In America, the MGB was known as the sports car America loved first. I think a more accurate name could be the sports car that America loved to regulate to death. It started off innocuously enough with just the high back seats and the regular ugly side markers that you have to have for the American market. But then in 1974, they had to put on these ugly pro-pedestrian bumpers. You can still, with some aftermarket parts today, take off that rubber bumper and replace it. If you squint real hard, you'll see that really it's the exact same car underneath. They just had to put on these ugly rubber bumpers to pass American regulations. And then in '75, America decided that the headlights were too low. And rather than redesign the whole car like a lot of other manufacturers might have done, MG decided that they would just put little blocks under the suspension to raise the whole car up and make the lights higher, but at the same time ruin the car's performance. Also in '75, this car got the twin carburetors replaced with the single Stromberg that ruined the performance further. And then in '76, of course, they got catalytic converters that then brought the performance of this car down substantially. A really unusual feature of the MGB that you can't unsee once you know it's there is the fact that it has 3 windshield wipers, very much like the E-Type Jag of the same era. And the reason for that is the windshield on this car and the E-Type Jag is so low that they weren't able to wipe the required percentage of windshield with just 2 wipers. And to get around that, they just added a 3rd one. And you can see that today in a modern car like the FJ Cruiser, which also has a really low and wide windshield and therefore requires that 3rd windshield wiper. So it has a choke, but the car is pretty warm. We didn't need it at all today. And first gear there, lovely. Oh, come on, please. Pretty please, cherry on top. I think that's first. Is that fourth? Okay, yeah. So the gearbox is not vague at all. And then let's turn the brake off, which is on the passenger side because there's just not enough room for it. And here we go. Feel the power. 4,000 RPM. Quite fun. There is no power steering, but really it feels very good. It does have rack and pinion steering. I feel if it had power, it might make the car less enjoyable. One of my favorite things driving the car around today has been the steering. It's very direct and has a nice weight to it, even when you're just maneuvering. And we've done some U-turns here and it's got a very good turning circle as well. So in that respect, it's quite fun to drive. The suspension is quite nice as well. It has coil springs up front, but just leaf springs in the back, which is sort of an older style, but certainly works plenty well for this car. Going along with the minimalist manual nature of this car, it also has workout windows, which is quite fun. My daughter took a minute to try to figure out how to operate those things. I'm not sure we've had a car ever that has the wind-up windows, other than the 356. If you've seen those videos, that does have wind-up windows. Another thing, we don't have any air conditioning. The roof is the air conditioning. We have some basic heater and fan controls. A couple of quirks to this car. There is no horn here on the steering wheel that we're all so used to. It's on the stalk here. There you go, that's the loudest it's been all day. The personality of the car transmits over to the horn. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. This car does have Lucas electronics, but thankfully doesn't have the positive ground anymore. And as long as the car stays dry, the electrics are pretty reliable. Another quirk to this car is the headlight switch is underneath the steering wheel here. If you didn't know where that was, you would never find it. The dash is very good looking, quite sporty. The large rev counter and speedo in front of you. We do get a fuel gauge, of course. We have, what's that? Oil pressure, lovely. And we have some, which is good. And then a clock and the temperature, which these cars are known in the day for running hot in certainly the California weather. But this car today, it has not got past halfway. So far, so good. It does smell a little hot at times, but maybe that's just that old car kind of personality. The MGB was a popular British roadster in the USA for many years. But sadly, it did meet its demise as a couple of situations conspired to bring it to an end. After William Morris decided to retire, the MG brand was owned by many different companies. In 1969, the name was bought by British Leyland, a huge British conglomerate that at the time owned the majority of the British car brands. And that signaled the end of the MGB, not because it wasn't popular, and not necessarily because American smog regulations reduced its power over the years, but because British Leyland owned the main competition for the MGB, Triumph. And at the time, in 1979, Triumph were trying to sell their brand new and cool Triumph TR7 in the American market, and they felt that the MGB was taking sales away from their new car. In addition to that, the MGB was getting kind of long in the tooth. They were having trouble keeping it up with American regulations, and so they made the decision to pull the MGB from the American market. And then in 1979, Britain also had a change of government. Margaret Thatcher came into power and decided that she would break up British Leyland, and that resulted in the end of the MG brand until it was revived by the Rover Group in 1995 with the MGF. Of course, with a 45-year-old car, you're not going to expect too much in the way of safety equipment. We do have shoulder belts, which is good compared to the 356, but no airbags. You're going to lose a tooth if you hit this steering wheel. But for the time, it was fairly advanced. Compared to the MGA, which had a body on chassis design, this car does have a unibody design that leads to a stiffer platform and a better feeling performance. Like, it doesn't feel too bad, especially for a convertible. I don't experience too much scuttle shake here, and the handling of the car is really one of my favorite parts of it. In addition to that, it was one of the very first cars to have crumple zones built into the design, which came standard on all cars from there on. And in addition to that, the brakes, while it only has drum brakes on the back, it does have 11-inch disc brakes on the front, and for a very light car, I'd have to say it does stop just fine. It's the going that maybe it could do with a little bit more. They do have a supercharger available for this car that you can buy from a company in Los Angeles, and I'd say that it could definitely do with that if you expected to try to keep up with modern cars. In general, everyone's behind us probably being a little upset, but the road ahead is clear, so from our point of view, not too bad. I'm out of gears again. While the majority of the 500,000 MGBs produced were roadsters like this one, they did have some cool variations over the years. Most notably in 1965, the Pininfarina designed MGB GT hatchback, and then also in 1967 they made a 3-litre straight 6 version called the MGC, and then for a short time in 1973 they made the MGB GT V8, which had the 3.5-litre V8 motor from the Range Rover. That was short-lived, sadly, because one, British Leyland couldn't provide MG with enough V8 motors. Then also at the time, of course, they had gas price issues and insurance rates issues that put the final nail in the coffin of a V8 version of this Roadster. So should you pick yourself up one of these MGBs? Well, we've had such a hilarious time bombing around the country lanes in this car today. It did make me wonder, like, what else could you get? This car as it sits is $10,000, and that's with 35,000 original miles, all of the service history, including the original bill of sale. And so what else are you going to get? You can't afford a Lotus Elan for $10,000. You'll get a somewhat ropey Mazda Miata, and I know that this car is way more interesting than any Miata. And then also in the aftermarket now, of course, you can buy superchargers for this. You can buy the chrome bumper conversion to make it look like one of the cool 60s one. And then of course, nobody cares about smog on a 45-year-old car, so you can put the dual carburetors on there, you can get rid of the catalytic converters, and just have a really fun project car that's way more interesting than any modern car and a tremendous amount of fun on these country roads. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you like this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. If you'd like me to drive your car and talk about it, then send me a message to the email below.
Hold on, what's the dog doing? Oh yeah, subscribe now. Delta says thank you.
Oh good, what gear is that? I need 2.5 again.